Let me tell you something that most music channels will never say out loud. The greatest rock and roll artist of all time is not the one with the most records sold.
Loving you isn't the right thing to do.
It is not the one with the most #1 hits. It is not even the one you learned about first in school. The greatest rock and roll artist of all time is the one who carried the weight of the entire genre on their back and made it look effortless.
Come as you are, as you were.
And before we get to that name, and yes, we are getting there, and yes, there is only one answer. We have to start somewhere else. We have to start at the bottom because you cannot understand the throne without understanding the floor.
This is ground control to Major Tom.
Today, I am laying out the 7 levels of rock music artists. It's 7 rungs on a ladder that begins in the Mississippi Delta in the 1930s in rooms so poor that guitar strings were made from wire and ends at the summit of the entire 20th century.
Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye, yeah, that'll be the...
This is not a popularity contest. This is a hierarchy of impact, of sacrifice, of cultural permanence. And every artist on every level earned their place. Let us build the ladder, one level at a time. Before Chuck Berry wrote a single note, before Elvis Presley walked into a Memphis recording studio, before the Beatles set foot on an airplane to America. Before any of it, there was the blues. And without the blues, there is no rock and roll. Not one song, not one guitar riff, not one drum fill, nothing.
Well, you know the hoochie coochie man.
Level 7 is not where the least important artists live. Level 7 is where the entire history of rock music was born. These are the men who created the vocabulary, the bent notes, the driving rhythm, the call and response, the guitar as a voice rather than just an instrument that every single artist on this list absorbed and transformed into what we now call rock and roll. Robert Johnson. He recorded only 29 songs in his entire lifetime, in 2 sessions in 1936 and 1937. 29 songs. But he died in 1938 at approximately 27 years old.
Walking like a man.
The original member of a tragic club that would later include Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain. The legend of Robert Johnson says he sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads in Mississippi in exchange for his guitar talent. The reality is more complicated and more impressive. He was a devoted student who practiced obsessively and absorbed every technique available to him. His recordings were rediscovered in the 1960s and 1961 LP compilation, introduced him to a generation of British musicians, including the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton, who built empires on foundations he laid.
The gypsy woman told my mother before I was born.
Muddy Waters, born McKinley Morganfield in 1913 in Mississippi. He moved to Chicago in 1943 and plugged his guitar into an amplifier, electrifying the Delta blues and creating the template that Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and nearly every hard rock band of the 20th century would follow.
You got a boy child coming.
The Rolling Stones took their name from his 1950 song, Rollin' Stone. Bob Dylan took the title of his 1965 masterpiece, Like a Rolling Stone, from the same tradition.
I'm gonna make you girls leave me by my hand.
Muddy Waters did not need to be famous for these debts to exist. The music spoke for itself.
I got the John the Conqueror. I'm gonna mess with you.
Howlin' Wolf, born Chester Arthur Burnett in 1910 in White Station, Mississippi. His voice was unlike anything that had existed in recorded music before: a howl, a growl, a force of nature compressed into a human body.
Be a son of a gun. Gonna make pretty women.
Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones said of him he was the most important bluesman he had ever encountered. His 1951 recording How Many More Years and 1961 Smokestack Lightning were direct blueprints for the hard rock of the following decade.
Jump and shout. Then the world wanna.
The Stones, Cream, The Doors, and Led Zeppelin all covered his songs or drew directly from his style. Little Richard, born Richard Wayne Penniman in Macon, Georgia in 1932, he is the bridge between this level and the next. The last great bluesman and the first great rock and roller simultaneously. His 1955 recording Tutti Frutti was a seismic event. That opening scream, a wop bop a loo bop a lop bam boom, announced the arrival of a completely new kind of performer. Loud, flamboyant, physically untamed, and rhythmically unstoppable, Paul McCartney said he learned to sing by trying to imitate Little Richard's voice. He could not get close. No one could. Now we climb. Level 6 is where rock and roll was invented, not evolved, not refined, invented from scratch, in real time in front of audiences who had never heard anything like it before. Chuck Berry, born Charles Edward Anderson Berry on October 18, 1926, in St. Louis, Missouri. If you want a single sentence that defines level 6, it is this one. Spoken by John Lennon. If you tried to give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry. In 1958, Berry released Johnny B. Good. The song peaked at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 2 on the Hot R&B Sides chart.
Deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the...
Rolling Stone ranked it number 7 on their definitive list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. NASA included it on the Voyager Golden Record.
Evergreens, there stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy.
The disc launched into deep space in 1977 to represent the achievements of humanity to whatever civilizations might one day find it.
Named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play.
Of all the music that has ever been created on this planet, Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good was chosen as one of the 27 recordings to represent the entire species.
A guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go.
When Berry was inducted into the first ever Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class on January 23, 1986, he performed Johnny B. Good, backed by Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band.
Go, go, Johnny, go, 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 Johnny.
The man who would eventually be standing at level 1 on this list was playing rhythm guitar behind the man at level 6. That is the weight of the debt. His guitar riffs, the double string bends, the duck walk across the stage, the opening lines of Johnny B. Good became the genetic code of rock and roll guitar.
Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go.
Keith Richards said he could never overstate how important Berry was to his own development. Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, all of them grew up with Chuck Berry as their first teacher.
Well, that'll be the day.
Buddy Holly, born Charles Hardin Holly on September 7th, 1936 in Lubbock, Texas. He wore glasses on stage at a time when rock musicians were supposed to look dangerous and untouchable.
Say goodbye, yeah, that'll be the day when you make me cry.
And he made it work because the music was that good. He wrote his own songs, he played his own instruments, he produced his own records. In 1958 alone, he recorded Peggy Sue, Oh Boy, Rave On, and That'll Be the Days, a body of work that the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan have all cited as foundational.
Say you're gonna leave, you know it's a lie, 'cause that'll be the day.
Paul McCartney named the Beatles partly in tribute to Holly's band, the Crickets, on February 3rd, 1959. And Buddy Holly boarded a small chartered plane in Clear Lake, Iowa after a concert.
Hey, when I die, well, you give me all your loving and your turtle doving.
The plane crashed in a cornfield shortly after takeoff. Holly was 22 years old. Richie Valens and the Big Bopper also died in the crash. Don McLean would later call it the day the music died in his 1971 song, American Pie.
All you hugs, kisses, and your money too. Well, you know you love me.
He was not exaggerating. In 18 months of commercial recordings, Buddy Holly had already changed the shape of popular music permanently. Elvis Presley. On July 5th, 1954, a 19-year-old truck driver from Tupelo, Mississippi, walked into Sun Studios in Memphis and recorded That's All Right. It was a combination of Delta blues and country music that no one had ever heard before from a white American artist. Loose, physical, uninhibited, and completely electrifying. Sam Phillips, the producer, reportedly said he had been looking for a white man who could sing with the feel of a black man, and he had found him. Rolling Stone ranked Elvis Presley number 3 on their list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. He is, by most measures, the best-selling solo artist in American history, with estimates of over 600 million records sold worldwide when combined with the Beatles. Elvis belongs at level 6 and not higher for a specific reason. He was the most famous rock and roll artist of his era, but he did not write his own songs, and after his army service in 1958, he never fully recaptured the dangerous, groundbreaking energy of his early Sun Records work. The artists above him on this list changed the form itself. Elvis changed the audience. Level 5 is where rock and roll became a global religion. The artists at this level took everything that had been built at level 7 and 6, plugged it into Marshall amplifiers, turned the volume all the way up, and played it for stadiums of 100,000 people.
I see a red door and I want it painted.
The Rolling Stones formed in London in 1962. Their first single was a cover of Chuck Berry's Come On. Right there, in their very first commercial release, you can trace the direct line from level 6 to level 5.
Black, no colors anymore. I want the
The Stones absorbed the blues, absorbed Chuck Berry, absorbed Muddy Waters, and built something new on top of it. An attitude, a swagger.
to turn black.
A menace that was completely calculated and completely real at the same time. They have now been making music for over 60 years, longer than any other major rock band in history that still includes original members. Over 200 million records sold worldwide. Founding member Brian Jones drowned in his own swimming pool on July 3rd, 1969.
Turn my head until my darkness goes.
Drummer Charlie Watts, the quiet backbone of the greatest live rock band in the world, died on August 24th, 2021. The Stones have outlived their own mythology and are still playing.
Hey lady, you got the love I need.
Led Zeppelin, formed by guitarist Jimmy Page in London in late 1968 from the remnants of the Yardbirds.
Baby, more than enough.
Robert Plant on vocals, John Paul Jones on bass and keyboards, and John Bonham on drums.
Oh, darling, 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 walk a while with me.
In 1971, they released their fourth album, officially untitled, commonly known as Led Zeppelin IV, which has since sold 37 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums in the history of recorded music.
Oh, you got so much.
The album contains Stairway to Heaven. That song was never released as a commercial single. The band refused. It did not matter. By its 20th anniversary in 1991,
I really need so much. I have to have.
it had been played on American radio stations approximately 2,874,000 times. It was the most requested and most played song on U.S. rock radio throughout the entire 1970s.
So much.
In the late 1990s, a radio trade magazine reported that the largest American rock radio stations were still playing it over 4,200 times per year. Guitar World's readers voted its solo the greatest guitar solo of all time. On September 25, 1980, Led Zeppelin's drummer John Bonham was found dead at the age of 32. The cause was asphyxiation following a day of extremely heavy alcohol consumption. Rolling Stone ranked him the greatest rock drummer of all time in 2016. 3 days after his death, the remaining members of Led Zeppelin issued a press statement. We could not continue as we were. They disbanded on December 4th. 1980, they did not replace Bonham. They did not hire another drummer. They simply stopped. Because you do not replace what cannot be replaced. The Who, Roger Daltrey, Pete Townshend, John Entwistle, and Keith Moon, My Generation. In 1965, with its stuttering declaration of defiance and its lyric, I hope I die before I get old, was one of the defining statements of the rock generation. Pete Townshend's windmill guitar style, the power chords, the controlled aggression, this was a band that played as if every performance might be their last. Keith Moon, one of the greatest and most theatrical drummers in rock history, died of an accidental overdose on September 7th, 1978, at the age of 32.
Hey Joe, where you going?
I said at the start of this video that level 4 is where the music stopped being a genre and became a language.
And may God's love be with you.
That is exactly what happened. The artists at this level did not just play rock and roll well, they changed what it was possible for rock and roll to say, to look like, to feel like, between rock and theater, between rock and protest, between rock and psychedelia, between rock and the entire history of human consciousness. Jimi Hendrix, born November 27, 1942 in Seattle, Washington. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame describes him as the greatest instrumentalist in the history of rock music. Rolling Stone ranked him #1 on their list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. He played a right-handed Fender Stratocaster upside down and restrung for left-hand playing, which actually changed the tonal properties of the instrument used. The slant of the bridge pickup meant his lowest string had a brighter sound and his highest string had a darker sound, the exact opposite of the intended design. He turned that accidental difference into a completely original sonic identity.
Where you going with that gun in your hand?
In 1969, Jimi Hendrix was the highest paid rock musician in the world. He headlined the Woodstock Music and Art Fair on August 18, 1969, performing a set that began at approximately 8 in the morning to a crowd that had thinned from its peak of 400,000 to somewhere between 30,000 and 70,000 people who had stayed through the night to see him close the festival. In that set, he performed a version of The Star-Spangled Banner that used feedback, distortion, and sustained to produce sounds that no electric guitar had ever produced before, with sounds that scholars have described as imitating bombs, sirens, and the chaos of the Vietnam War.
You know, I'm gonna mess around with another man.
Pop critic Al Aronovitz of the New York Post called it the most electrifying moment of Woodstock and probably the single greatest moment of the 60s.
You shut your lady down, you shut her down.
Hendrix died on September 18, 1970 in London of barbiturate-related asphyxia. He was 27 years old. His entire commercially active career lasted 4 years. In 4 years, he permanently and irreversibly changed what an electric guitar could do. Every guitarist alive today in every genre is working in a universe that Jimi Hendrix created.
Ground control to Major Tom.
David Bowie, born David Robert Jones on January 8, 1947, in Brixton, London. When he is rock music's greatest shapeshifter,
Ground control to Major Tom.
artist who reinvented himself so completely and so many times that his career reads not as a single story, but as a series of completely distinct lives lived inside the same body.
Take your
Ziggy Stardust in 1972, Aladdin Sane in 1973, The Thin White Duke in 1976. He recorded 27 studio albums across 5 decades.
protein pills and put your helmet on.
He died on January 10th, 2016, 2 days after releasing his final album, Black Star, which critics immediately recognized as a meditation on his own approaching death. He was 69 years old.
Ground control to Major Tom.
What separates Bowie from every other artist at his level is this: he was never trying to be the best at any one thing. He was trying to discover what the next thing was. He used rock music the way a scientist uses a laboratory.
7, 6, commencing count.
As a controlled environment for experiments in identity, sexuality, genre, and performance. And the experiments never stopped. Pink Floyd, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and the late Syd Barrett.
Check ignition and may God's love be with.
Their 1973 album, The Dark Side of the Moon, is one of the best-selling albums in music history, with estimated sales of over 50 million copies worldwide. It spent over 900 weeks on the Billboard 200 album chart. Not the most weeks at #1, but the most weeks on the chart at all, across multiple decades. The album addressed mental illness, greed, aging, and mortality in a way that rock music had never attempted before. It was not just an album. It was a fully constructed argument about what it means to be alive. Level 3, The Legends.
Could you be the most beautiful girl?
And here's how I define this level. A legend is an artist whose music is still being discovered by people who were not yet born when it was recorded. Someone whose cultural impact keeps compounding.
We sit here stranded
Though we all do our best.
Getting larger with each passing decade rather than smaller, that is the test, and every artist at level 3 passes it. Freddie Mercury and Queen on July 13th, 1985 at Wembley Stadium in London in front of 72,000 people and an estimated 1.9 billion television viewers worldwide. Freddie Mercury took the stage for Live Aid and delivered a 21-minute performance that a 2005 poll of more than 60 music industry executives, artists, and journalists would later vote the greatest live rock performance in the history of the genre. He did not have a set list. He improvised call and response with the crowd. He had been advised by his doctor not to perform at all that day because of vocal issues. He performed anyway. His sustained note during the a cappella section, which came to be known as the note heard round the world, silenced a stadium of 72,000 people and made them hold their breath simultaneously. BBC presenter David Hepworth said it produced the greatest display of community singing the old stadium had ever seen. Freddie Mercury was diagnosed with AIDS in 1987. He continued recording with Queen through 1991, completing vocal tracks while he was barely able to stand. He issued a public statement confirming his diagnosis on November 23, 1991. He died the following evening on November 24, 1991, of bronchial pneumonia resulting from AIDS. He was 45 years old. And the statement he released was one of the most dignified last words in rock history. I hope that everyone will join with me, my doctors, and all those worldwide in the fight against this terrible disease. Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. In September 1991, a three-piece band from Aberdeen, Washington released their second album, Nevermind, on DGC Records. The album had been made for roughly $65,000 and was expected to sell perhaps 250,000 copies. By January 1992, it had knocked Michael Jackson's Dangerous off the #1 spot on the Billboard 200. It was RIAA certified diamond, 10 million US copies sold within 7 years. Nirvana has since sold over 75 million records worldwide. Smells Like Teen Spirit, the album's lead single, did not just become a hit. It ended an era, the hair metal and glam rock of the 1980s, Poison. The Motley Crue, Warrant, every band with big hair and bigger production budgets. Take your time, hurry up. Was swept aside almost overnight. Cobain's music was the antidote to excess. Deliberately ugly, self-aware, emotionally honest in a way that the previous decade's rock rarely attempted. It's just don't be late. Take a rest. Kurt Cobain died on April 5th, 1994. He was 27 years old. In his suicide note, he quoted Neil Young, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." He had been the voice of his generation against his will, a title he found suffocating and spent his entire career trying to escape. Nirvana was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014, their first year of eligibility. They received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023.
And it just like the night.
Bob Dylan, Rolling Stone ranked him #2 on their list of the 100 greatest artists of all time, behind only the Beatles.
You play tricks when you're trying to be so quiet.
His 1965 single, Like a Rolling Stone, was named the greatest song ever recorded by Rolling Stone magazine.
We sit here stranded.
In October 2016, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, the first musician in history to receive it, for, in the Nobel Committee's words, having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition.
Though we all do our best to deny it.
He is the only rock musician to receive a Nobel Prize. He wrote Blowin' in the Wind at age 21. He wrote The Times They Are A-Changin' at 22.
And Louise, oh.
He wrote Mr. Tambourine Man at 23. At an age when most people are still figuring out who they are, Bob Dylan had already written the soundtrack to a civil rights movement. Before we get to level 1, I want you to ask yourself something. Of all the artists we have covered so far,
The heart is a balloon, shoots up.
all the way from Robert Johnson in the Mississippi Delta to Kurt Cobain in Seattle, which one hits the hardest for you personally? Drop the name in the comments right now. I want to see where you land. Level 2, the icons, and the definition here is very specific. An icon is an artist whose music transcended not just genre, not just generation, but geography. An icon is a musician whose recordings have been heard in places the artist never visited. By people who do not speak the same language, living lives the artist never imagined, and those people found something true inside the music that belonged to them personally.
The heart is a balloon.
U2, formed in Dublin, Ireland in 1976 by 4 teenagers, Bono, The Edge, Adam Clayton, and Larry Mullen Jr. They are one of the best-selling music acts in history, with over 170 million records sold worldwide.
Shoots up through the stony ground. There's no room.
In 1985 at Live Aid, their performance, Bono's spontaneous leap into the crowd to dance with a young woman while the band played on, became one of the most iconic images of that already iconic day.
No space to rent in this town.
It was unplanned, unrehearsed, and it cost them their entire remaining set list because the moment ran too long. Bono later said it was either the best or worst thing I've ever done. The following day, their record sales spiked across the world.
You're out of luck.
Their 1987 album, The Joshua Tree, went to #1 in 22 countries and won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. Rolling Stone placed it among the 100 greatest albums ever made.
And the reason that you had to care, the traffic is stuck.
Their concert at Giant Stadium in New Jersey on August 29th. In 1992, during the Zoo TV tour, drew 70,000 people and was described by critics as the most ambitious and technically complex concert production in rock history to that point.
I could stay awake just to hear you.
Aerosmith, the most important American hard rock band between the mid-1970s and the early 1990s.
Watch you smile.
Steven Tyler's vocals, Joe Perry's guitar work. They recorded Dream On in 1973, Sweet Emotion in 1975, and Walk This Way in 1975, which Run DMC would later sample and re-release in 1986.
You are sleeping while you're far away.
Creating one of the first genuine crossover moments between rock and hip-hop, and introducing Aerosmith to an entirely new generation. Their 1994 album Crazy and the Alicia Silverstone video trilogy helped them sell an entirely different kind of record to an entirely different kind of audience.
I could spend my life in this.
They are one of the best-selling American rock bands of all time, one with over 150 million records sold. Eric Clapton, the only musician to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 3 times as a member of the Yardbirds, as a member of Cream, and as a solo artist. Rolling Stone ranked him number 4 on their list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. His blues influences, drawn directly from Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters at Level 7, never left his playing. Every note he has played in 50 years of recording has had the delta in it somewhere.
I wanna live, I wanna give.
Neil Young, the godfather of grunge, Kurt Cobain quoted him in his final note.
I've been a miner for a heart of gold.
His early 1970s work with Crazy Horse, albums like Harvest, 1972, and Tonight's the Night, 1975, established a template for raw, emotionally direct guitar rock that Nirvana and every subsequent alternative rock band absorbed.
It's these expressions.
He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, as a solo artist and as a member of Buffalo Springfield.
Hey, Rocklore community. Before we continue, let's have a real talk for a second, bro. You know, this isn't just a channel to us. And I hope it's not just a place you come to watch a video and then forget about it. This is a community. It's a place where we get to dig up the secrets of rock and roll, share our favorite riffs, and celebrate the artists who maybe didn't get the love they deserved. Right now, only about 1% of our viewers are subscribed. We can change that together and grow this community. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on. When you do, you're not just helping a channel grow, you're becoming a member of the Rocklore family. You're signaling to us and to YouTube that these stories matter, that this music is worth preserving, and that this community is a place you want to be. Subscribing is your way of making sure you're always in the loop. It means you'll be the first to know when we unearth a forgotten legend, drop a new countdown, or dive into a piece of rock history you've never heard before. So if you're a true fan of the lore, if you get that same feeling of discovery that I do, then come join us. It takes 1 second to be a part of something bigger.
And here we are, level 1, the throne, and I want to be very precise about what I mean when I say there is no debate here. I do not mean there are not other extraordinary, world-changing artists in rock history. This entire document is full of them. I mean that the conversation about the greatest rock and roll act of all time begins and ends in the same place. It begins with the Beatles, and it ends with the Beatles. Let us begin with the numbers, because they are staggering even before you get to the music. The Beatles are the best-selling music act in the history of recorded music, with estimated worldwide sales of over 600 million units. Guinness World Records has confirmed this. The RIAA's Gold and Platinum Certification Program lists them as the top certified band in U.S. history. With over 177 million album certifications, more than any other act in American music history, they hold the record for the most #1 singles on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 with 20. They hold the record for the most #1 albums on the UK Albums Chart with 15. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988, their first year of eligibility. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was the first rock album to win the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. On April 4th, 1964, a single week in the spring of their American breakthrough, the Beatles held the top 5 positions on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 simultaneously, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all 5 spots. No other act in the history of the chart has ever done that. Not before, not since. On February 9th, 1964, the Beatles made their American television debut on The Ed Sullivan Show. An estimated 73 million people watched, approximately 34% of the entire U.S. population at the time. It was the largest television audience in American history to that point. The Beatles had only released one American single before that broadcast. 73 million people tuned in anyway. Now the music. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr were active together as the classic Beatles lineup for 8 years, from 1962 to 1970. In those 8 years, they moved through more complete stylistic reinventions than most artists achieve in a lifetime. The 3-chord rock and roll of 1963, She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand, gave way to the introspective songwriting of 1965, In My Life, Norwegian Wood, now which gave way to the psychedelic experimentation of 1967, Strawberry Fields Forever, A Day in the Life, which gave way to the stripped-back return to roots of 1969, Get Back, Let It Be. Each of these phases would have been sufficient to establish any other act as one of the greatest rock bands of all time. The Beatles did all of them consecutively in the same decade with the same 4 people. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, released on June 1st, 1967, spent 15 consecutive weeks at the top of the UK album charts. It sold 2.5 million copies within its first 3 months of release, breaking every previous Beatles sales record. It was the first album to list its lyrics on the cover. It was the first rock album to use a full orchestral score as an integral part of its production. It changed what an album was, conceptually and artistically, in a way that has never been reversed. John Lennon was shot and killed outside his New York City apartment building, the Dakota, on December 8, 1980. He was 40 years old. George Harrison died of lung cancer on November 29, 2001. He was 58. Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr remain musically active as of this writing. Here is the final thing I want to say about why the Beatles sit alone at level 1. It is not the record sales, it is not the chart positions, it is not even the 8 extraordinary years of music. It is this: the Beatles are the only rock act in history that every other artist on this list, every artist at level 7 through level 2, and every artist ever listened to and was changed by. Robert Plant listened to them, Kurt Cobain listened to them, Freddie Mercury listened to them, not David Bowie listened to them, Jimi Hendrix covered their songs, Bob Dylan was pushed to write his own lyrics partly by hearing their craft. Every genre, every generation, every corner of the world that rock and roll has ever reached, the Beatles were there first. They did not just sit at the top of rock music, they were the reason the top existed at all.